Yep, that's me and my band back in the day, doing our best to get the message out there with a little help from some friends, trying to get rid of tobacco. We've done really well as a country, but while the number of smokers in Aotearoa has dropped, Māori smoking rates remain way higher than non-Māori. In 2011, driven by Māori, New Zealand set an ambitious target, a smoke-free Aotearoa by 2025. The problem is, tobacco is easy to get hold of and really addictive. So a law was passed to make it harder to access, non-addictive and illegal to sell to anyone born after 2009, creating a smoke-free generation. It wasn't just pie in the sky either, it was supported by some pretty solid research. Then this happened.
Kua takoto I te kāwanatanga hou tana mahere mo ngā rā ko tahirau tuatahi ona hei kāwanatanga. Ka nui te māharahara o etahi mātanga hauora mo ngā pākinotanga ki te Māori ka hua.
We think there's issues around a 36-year-old can smoke but a 35-year-old can't. We just think some of that doesn't work.
These next steps were world leading.
Well, they haven't been done before, and therefore there is no proof or evidence that they would have had the effects that were promised.
We don't not pass laws because we're afraid they won't be complied with. You know, people still murder people, but we have laws against murdering. So we don't stop it just because it won't be perfect.
It's created shockwaves both here and overseas.
This is really an act of public health vandalism. A really good law that was based on evidence and very strong public support is going to be repealed. So it's really a terrible move.
Believe it or not, I wasn't surprised, given the indications of this particular government, their coalition partners. They've been very quite clear about where they think Māori fit in society.
Disappointed but not surprised is how I felt. As Indigenous people, it's not our first rodeo.
Well, I was pretty devastated, not only because we might be losing this example for the rest of the world on how to deal with tobacco, but also because I'm quite involved in a global effort to push for such endgame policies, and it will be a giant step back.
This is another win for the tobacco lobby in a very, very long to and fro where incrementally they have lost the battles and somehow they seem to use their leverage, whether it's political or legal or whatever, to get governments to backtrack.
The language used by people like Nicola Willis by effectively saying we are throwing the next generation under the bus for the sake of a tax grab to fill a fiscal hole was, just stunning.
Are you saying that the tax on smokers is going to fund the tax cuts? Is that what I just heard?
What you saw in the pre-election fiscal update was that Treasury assessed that the effect of drastically reducing the number of shops that could sell tobacco products, denicotising those products and introducing a range of restrictions would significantly reduce revenue to the Crown.
I think it's the kind of thing that people don't usually say out loud. It's unconscionable to say that we need this money so these people can die, but it's also simply wrong.
That's right. We have very good data in New Zealand on the economic impacts of different diseases. So when we looked at the tobacco-related diseases, we could see for each one, for lung cancer, for heart disease, what impact being sick from those diseases had in terms of income. And also that income is taxed by the government, so that the government actually gets more income tax when citizens are healthier and are protected from tobacco-related harm.
In the long run, the savings from getting rid of tobacco will dwarf the tax revenue that any government gets, no matter how high you tax it.
The coalition agreement says all decisions must be based on evidence and data.
Where did the evidence come from about a black market?
Well, it's just a natural reality when you actually have less distribution outlets. It goes underground, it goes into a black market. Again, it's just a reality of when you've got less supply.
There's no good evidence that the black market's going to increase significantly. There's no evidence that ram raids are going to increase.
That's something that the tobacco industry has trotted out for every tobacco policy ever proposed, and it's rarely come true. So we've had some studies on policies like this. Tasmania, for instance, was considering a smoke-free generation law, and they did a one-year study with some economists, and they found that there would be no illicit market.
The whole idea behind the current smoke-free laws is to save lives. And let's be clear about the enormous health costs associated with smoking.
When models have been built, they've been able to look at what you expect in terms of reduced cancers and heart disease. And this law was going to help save, at least prevent 8,000 deaths by 2040. But we've also modelled the economic aspects, and we found that the massive savings to New Zealand citizens from not being addicted to tobacco and having to buy it amounted actually to $46 billion by 2050. Much of that economic benefit would go to Māori communities as well.
In my view, it's time for the government to let people start making their own choices and not have 5 million people living in a nanny state.
And it sounds good at a very superficial level, because it speaks of freedoms and and liberty, but they fail to talk about the addiction.
Addiction removes the choice. We have an industry that has started with an addictive product and has spent half a century making it more addictive.
Every smoker we come across wants to quit. They have a great desire to quit. But what they say to us constantly is, make it easier for us to quit by changing the environment we live in.
We're talking about structural change to support them to live healthy, fruitful lives in a way that is safe for them, their families and future generations.
Tragically, around the world, Indigenous populations do have higher smoking rates.
To me, there is a massive impact on us culturally. If you're transmitting, and your role is one of those people to transmit, mā tauranga Māori, but you're dead by the time you hit 60 or you're incapacitated, then that transference back into our Tau Māori space is interfered with. And that to me is a massive burden that we've carried for decades.
So think about the knowledge, the cultural protocols, practice, languages that we can share and can be passed on from generation to generation, that our elders can pass on if they have another 10 years of productive life.
For the last few years, we've been focused on vaping, right?
There's been a huge debate worldwide on the e-cigarettes, and it's caused a bit of a rift within the public health community between those who say, well, we should be promoting these so that adult smokers can move to something that's less dangerous, to others who say, well, it's a nicotine or an addiction-based business model just isn't acceptable no matter what. And children using nicotine it's not safe. We know that it causes harm. One of my pet peeves with the debate is that people always ask, aren't they safer than cigarettes? But that's like saying, isn't it safer to jump out a 5th-story window than a 10th-story window? I mean, cigarettes are by far the most dangerous consumer product in history. So e-cigarettes need not be as dangerous as cigarettes for us to be worried about them and regulate them.
Of course, other questions have been raised about what's going on in the shadows.
What's disturbing about this coalition agreement are the not so invisible fingers of the tobacco industry.
What are some of the tactics that the big tobacco use to combat any strategy towards tobacco control?
They tend to stay a little bit hidden. They know that they're the villains in the story, and they tend to use front groups in front of them, and potentially retailers. They like to sound the alarm on things like illicit trade. They like to go to finance ministers and say you're going to, it's going to bankrupt you, and they like to portray I'll call them their victims, but their customers as being harmed by this. But as we've already discussed, what's harming them is using these products.
There are concerns too around the nature of the process.
There's a real irony that the ACT Party, which has been campaigning around regulatory responsibility and participatory processes in democratic decision-making and going through all of these complex steps of ensuring that you have the most robust evidence-based legislation, gets thrown out the window when it's politically inexpedient to do so. There is plenty of background research and regulatory material on this to show that the legislation is justified, and the fact that they are bypassing those processes not only is hypocritical, but also suggests that they don't think it could stand up to robust scrutiny.
What do you think is going on then?
This seems to be just pure political horse trading. And you have to congratulate the tobacco companies on being able to have Trojan horses inside government. They've got sympathisers, they've got former lobbyists for the tobacco companies, they've got those committed to minimal regulation, those committed to giving rich people tax cuts, even if it means more people die. And so they're making hay while the sun shines, to mix a few metaphors.
Hundreds of health professionals hit the streets in Auckland and Wellington protesting plans to repeal the smoke-free laws. Demonstrators handed in a petition at Parliament.
The plan is let people die. We want the money so we can give tax cuts to our rich mates. That's their plan.
Why are you rolling back something so popular?
Well, we're not. We're staying with the status quo.
What does he say to the thousands of people who marched, the 47,000 who signed the petition, the 67% of voters who want our smoke-free laws to stay, and why won't he front up to them?
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, this government is committed to reducing smoking rates and helping people quit smoking.
So what is the message to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health?
Well, they should look at the evidence and review this issue and renegotiate with their coalition partners to prioritise protecting health and benefiting the economy by keeping this law.
Our rangatahi said it really succinctly. Do the right things. The wrong thing kills our people. The right thing ensures there is a generation beyond us and many more to come.
There's only one winner here if these laws are rescinded, and it's the industry. The government will lose in the long run financially. The people will lose. Don't be a puppet of the tobacco industry.
And just say, look, I think we made a mistake. Politically, that would be wise, and I think if they did recant and apologised, I think a lot of New Zealanders say, well done.